I appreciate it. Now have that going, so that's great. I'm not gonna join with audio. Feedback.
And make sure you can hear, and if not, come in.
Can we turn the lights down a little bit?
Sorry,
Can we turn the lights down a little bit?
is that possible?
I don't know. Yeah,
Where's a high school student when you need them? Really?
All right, well, thank you for that introduction, and I had to log back into Zoom, so I was a little distracted, but we'll get the lights right, we'll get the presentation up and going. And I really appreciate the introduction. So I'm Steve Lewis, and I have the bruises and the kind of experiences of modernizing my own home, electrifying it in a lot of different ways. And so I'm going to share some of that with you and put this IRA thing and how you can get access to different funds for different projects, put that all into context for you. So you kind of can see some real examples of how that all works. But first, we'll kind of set up the, why are we doing all this? What's the IRA about? Why are we seeking these funds? And so, the movement is to try to electrify everything to address climate change. Electrification is the way to go. Electric machines are way more efficient, and they're not emitting carbon emissions because they're not burning fossil fuels to do things like keep your house warm or make your hot water or move your car down the road. Okay, so we've got a planetary emergency because of climate change. There's this concept called committed emissions, and so every time somebody replaces their oil boiler or furnace with another fossil fuel-based oil boiler or furnace, or they buy a car that's a gasoline car, those are committed emissions. That vehicle or those machines are going to be around for another 10 to 20 years. And that's something we want to avoid. We want to make it easy for people to understand and to figure out how they can take advantage of financing, how they can take advantage of tax credits or rebates to electrify their own lives. And we need it to meet our climate goals as well. And basically, in new construction today, the monthly costs of going electric and having all of these machines installed in our homes is far cheaper than traditional fossil fuel-based systems. The modern machines work way better. Your homes are healthier. There aren't the risk of carbon monoxide emissions and other types of gases that are coming from that combustion. Everybody has to have a carbon monoxide detector in their homes, and the reason for that is you're combusting, carbon based fuels, and that's causing those gases to potentially come into your home. If you put some of these things in, like solar and battery backup, you can be resilient to grid outages. And I don't know about you, but I've had a number of outages in the last year. And maybe East Hampton, you have certain areas that lose power regularly, so this might help you to be more resilient to power outages. And of course, we need to get to zero in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So people really don't appreciate and realize just how much more efficient these particular devices are getting. They're all on learning curves, and so think smartphones, think flat panel TVs, think computers. Those technologies are all on learning curves, so they're constantly getting more efficient, faster, and cheaper at the same time. And solar and EVs and heat pumps are really no different. Solar is 2.5 times more efficient for electric generation than fossil fuels. And EVs are only using 1/4 of the amount of gasoline to move that vehicle down the road from an internal combustion engine car. Heat pumps, the air source heat pumps that we'll talk about tonight are only using about, they're 300% more efficient than the fossil fuel-based systems you have in your home. And if you have ground source heat pumps, they can be up to 6 times as efficient as what you're using today to heat your home. And so we talked about the learning curves. So the IRA is really a big deal. And what does it mean to you? So Rewiring America is the nation's leading electrification nonprofit. They're out there cheerleading to help educate people about the Inflation Reduction Act, how they can take advantage of it, and what will make sense for them. And by the way, I have handouts here with links to everything I'm talking about. So everybody in this room can walk away. You don't have to try to write down this. You can write notes, but you'll get the links from me for everything that's in the presentation. So the IRA is in theory going to deliver as much as $858 billion in electrification potential across America. Connecticut will certainly be getting its share of those dollars, but most of it is dependent on what individual citizens, homeowners, consumers choose to do and to take advantage of. And that's why talks like this are important, and there'll be more of them because the Inflation Reduction Act is good for another 8.5 years. And so the money is available to you for 8.5 years and to your family and your friends and your neighbors, et cetera. So we need to get the word out. We need to educate people about what this opportunity is. To this is Rewiring America has come up with an Inflation Reduction Act calculator. You know, we need a calculator because some of these dollars are available based on your income. The great thing about the Inflation Reduction Act is the money is available to people of all income levels. So if you're high income, you're more likely to be taking advantage of tax credits. And if you're moderate or low income, you're going to be able to take advantage of rebates and potentially tax credits too. And so the calculator will look at your income and will calculate for you what you're eligible for from the IRA. And they have a number of guides which are really helpful as you're beginning this thought process, this journey of potentially upgrading things in your homes to clean, zero emission electrification technologies. This one and the subsequent one, which I have links to, the thing that's great about these is not only do they lay out all the dollars that are available to you under different scenarios for different types of machines, but they also kind of coach you about, well, the first thing you want to do is think about what kind of an electrical service you have today. What, do you have a 100 amp or a 200 amp electrical panel in your home? The home of the future, the home that's fully electrified, is going to have greater demand for electricity, for heat pumps, for heat pump water heaters, for EV chargers. And so that home, is going to need a more powerful breaker box with more room in it, essentially, to run all those devices. And so you'll want to understand how much room you have there. Put in one of those new upgraded panels if you need to, and there's ways to work around it in the short run as well. So those guides are helpful. And Inflation Reduction Act is going to jumpstart this electrification movement. Now, just to put low and moderate income definitions up on the screen briefly and give you a little grounding in this. So the way it works is you're eligible for the maximum rebates from the Inflation Reduction Act if you qualify as low income. And you're eligible for 50% of those rebates if you're qualified as moderate income. And in Connecticut, just to give you an example, a family of four, and it's kind of a little covered on that side, but if you go across, a family of four, the state median income for family of four is, 95,582. So, you're going to be you're going to be eligible for a low income because it's lower than 80% of the median income. You're going to be eligible in a lot of cases. And you might be surprised at what the income levels are that are going to allow you to take full advantage of some of these dollars. So that's why that calculator is helpful, because it's going to look at that for you. It's going to figure out your median income, where you fit on that scale, and whether you're eligible for rebates or you're going to go the tax credit route. All right, I'm not going to go through a lot of this detail, but just to ground you in the rebates and the tax credits. What you see in the third column, rebates and tax credits, okay? And the first two rows on the top are rebates, electrification rebates and energy efficiency rebates. And the difference between those two is the first row is for low and moderate income households to put in heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, electric, inductors to get, new electrical panels, wiring and weatherization. And so if you're low and moderate income, you can get up to a total of $14,000 for low income, $7,000 from moderate income to get some of those, things installed in your home, okay? And so we'll show examples of how that works more kind of straightforwardly in upcoming slides. The next row, these are home efficiency rebates, and so they're looking at if you're gonna completely replace your oil boiler or your gas furnace and switch to heat pumps, it's a whole home replacement of an existing fossil fuel-based heating system, then you may qualify for the homes rebates. And that's gonna, give you some money based on how much efficiency, how much of an efficiency improvement has occurred after the work was done. So there's different ways, and your contractors will be able to tell you which of these two options might be best for you if you qualify for that. If you don't qualify for the rebates, then you're gonna be qualifying for the tax credits on the third row. And the tax credits are up to 30%. And as it relates to heat pumps and heat pump water heaters, there's maximums for some of these things. So 3,200 for a air source heat pump, 2,000 for a hot water heater, and less for insulation and windows and doors and things like that. And then in addition, they increased the tax credits for solar. So, 2 years ago, solar had a 22% tax credit, and now it's up to 30%. And that's big money for a big expensive solar project for your home. So you want to keep that in mind, because if you're thinking about doing solar, now is a great time to do it. You can take, if you have the income to offset for that tax credit, you can get yourself 30% off the top. And then there's also 30% tax credits for solar and storage. So EV for battery backup systems. And then I'm not going to get into it in this presentation, but there's tax credits for EVs. So for new EVs and for used EVs, and they've made the tax credits available upfront at the dealer now. So if your income is appropriate and you're buying a vehicle that's on the IRS list, you can qualify for up to $7,500 for a new vehicle, or you can qualify for something less on a used vehicle. But it's significant and helpful. All right, so in the interest of time, I'm going to skip through some of these slides and get right to.
Steve?
Yeah.
Correct that those tax credits will run for 5 years?
They're going to run for 10 years.
10 years, okay,
Yeah,
so you
well,
can,
and a year and a half has come off the 10 already.
okay, so
Since it's
you'll be eligible to take advantage of that. If you can't use it in 1 year, you'll be able to take those credits.
Correct. That's a great question. You're setting me up for my next two slides.
That's good.
So like an example from Rewiring America, this is a hypothetical family in Cleveland, Ohio, named the Colemans, and, they have 4 members of their family. Their income is $128,000 a year all in. And that's under 80% of the adjusted median income for Cleveland, Ohio. So they're going to be eligible for the maximum amount of rebates that come through on the Inflation Reduction Act for some of these things. And I know this is hard to read, but I'll just give you an example. So to your point, over time, you may choose to budget and prioritize certain upgrades to your house to electrify things. So what they choose to do in this hypothetical situation is, the first thing they do is they replace their propane cooking range with an induction electric cooktop. And the retail price of that cooktop was $749. and they were eligible for a $749 rebate. And so they got the induction stove essentially for nothing. I go, you know, if there's installation costs, you could possibly be using tax credit for that. Oh yeah, and then in the second line, they have electric wiring for that was $1,500. And actually they got $1,500 off on that as well. So they basically got the wired induction stove to replace their fossil fuel burning stove for zero in this scenario. And going down the list over time, they choose to upgrade certain things. Your house, something's always breaking, something's always needing to be replaced. We all know it. And at some point, your water heater is going to drain out on your floor as it does, frequently. And so you're going to need to replace your water heater. And someday, if you're there long enough, you need to replace the boiler or the furnace. And the nice thing is, and we'll get into it, but you're gonna save a lot of money. Okay, so how much can you really save? So if you replace a water heater, okay, an electric water heater, a water heater that's based on oil or propane or, most fuel sources, you're gonna save $350 per year or $3,750 over the lifetime of that unit. And I'm gonna get into a little story of my water heater that I put in my house in a minute, just to give you some examples. If you replace your furnace or your oil boiler for heating your home with a heat pump, you can save, depending on what you're heating with, $1,200 to $1,300 for electric baseboard heaters, up to, almost $1,000 for a fuel oil furnace, et cetera. So these are real dollars, real savings to you as the consumer, if you make these transitions. And the great thing about heat pumps is it's not just the savings in heating season, but it's also going to cool your home in the summer. And it's going to cool your home for less than window air conditioners or central, because it's more efficient. I'll get into some more of that. And if you put in rooftop solar in Connecticut, the payback average is about 7.5 years on a 25-year system. And you might not be able to see the bottom there, but after the system pays back, the savings is $59,223 over 20 years on a 5 kilowatt system. So there's electric rates are only going to continue to go up. And so if you have a house that's suitable for solar, and you're going to be there long enough, to make it worth your while, it's a great investment. And I'll talk a little bit about my experience with that as well. The first thing you got to do though, before you do anything else, you want to do your homework, you want to download some of this information, kind of peruse it, understand it a little better, but then you want to call in an expert. And the great news is experts are available to you for free. One of them is I Heart My Home, okay? And they're based out of New Haven, but they service the whole state and they will take your call and they'll ask you what you're considering doing. And they will meet with you by Zoom or online and do a call with you, get an understanding of what you're considering doing. And then they'll coach you through a project and whatever that might be. And they'll make you aware of what rebates and incentives are available, both from the Inflation Reduction Act and from the state utilities that you're eligible for, and then kind of coach you through making sure that you get the right contractor, you get the right advice, and that you come out satisfied with what you decided to do. That's great, because, and I think I heard you talking about briefly about the Eversource presentation in your meeting before this, and people that try to go it alone, sometimes they don't know what they're getting themselves into, so it's great to have an expert on your side. And so, the first thing you want to do is figure out how efficient your home is. And so, how many here have had a home energy audit before? Raise your hand. So a lot of you have. Home energy audits, in the past, might not have been quite up to the standards that they're using today. And, I've done some projects where my old home energy audit from from more than 5 years ago was no longer qualifying me for a project I was gonna do, so I had to do another home energy audit. So they do a blower door test, they go around with infrared cameras and they look for leaking areas on your house. You know, right now, as a utility customer with Eversource or Avangrid, you know, it only should cost you $75 to have a home energy audit if you haven't had one. So highly encourage you to do that, and of course, the consultants like iHeart My Home would insist that you do that. And you can actually get some of that 75 back as a tax credit from the IRA as well. And then they do a 4 to 6 hour review of your home. And, you know, the estimate is the value of what they give you is $1,350. They do some sealing, they do some LED work and things like that. I don't know if it's truly $1,350, but in the end, the reason you want to do this is because before you put in a heat pump, an air source heat pump in your house, for example, you want to size that system as efficiently as possible. So you want to make sure that your house is as tight as it can be and that you're not going to be wasting energy so that you get the right size system in your house. You know, there's money available for envelope sealing and insulation. So after that review, if they realize your house needs more insulation, it needs sealing, they might recommend bringing contractors in. There's a lot of money available from the state utilities, Energize CT, that, you know, will make that very, very affordable to you, as well as you can apply those tax credits or rebates from the IRA to it. So, you know, you're looking at affordability to do some of these things, and the average lifetime savings on you know, home ceiling insulation project is about $4,000, which is a lot. And then windows, you know, I replaced mine with double panes, but now there's triple panes out there. And, you know, triple pane windows are 3 times more efficient than single pane windows and 1.5 times as efficient as double pane windows. And so if you have any windows that you need to you know, upgrade, that's a big opportunity as well. And there's money out there for the IRA, the 30% tax credit up to $600 annually. But there's also a $100 rebate per window from Energize CT, as long as those windows meet the efficiency requirements. Average lifetime savings if you install all new triple pane windows in your home over, I think that's over a single pane, is $10,000. All right, so now we're going to get into some of my learning lessons learned and what I've accomplished over the years. I live in a 1968 colonial. It's about 2,000 square feet, and it needed a lot of work. It's had an oil boiler with hydronic baseboard heating, and you see a more modern version of the oil boiler over to the left here, and a Boilermate. So I was heating my water with that oil boiler and the Boilermate. And I decided last year in the beginning, I actually decided before the Inflation Reduction Act became effective, that I was going to use my first Inflation Reduction Act money to replace my hot water heater. So I bought a hybrid heat pump water heater. And you see the black part at the top of the new water heater. This is an A.O. Smith. It's called a hybrid heat pump water heater. I'll explain that in a minute, but there's a fan on the top, and that fan is running in the space that it's in, and it's drawing the heat from the air in my basement, and it's making that hot water super efficiently. And it's a hybrid because it can, if my 2 college-age kids run all the water out of the water heater, it can go to backup traditional electric heating to quickly make more hot water, so we don't run out or we have guests over or something. So it's nice that way, but it rarely does that happen. And for the rest of the year, you know, this device is incredibly efficient. So here's the Energy Star label on that hot water heater, and you see the $113 a year to run it is what the estimate is. And what's fascinating about that is the scale on that Energy Star label only goes down to a low of $120. So this heat pump water heater is more efficient than Energy Star's own scale, okay? So compared to making my hot water with oil, it's really a much better thing, and I'm saving money. And it dehumidifies my basement while it's making that hot water. So I traditionally have had to run a dehumidifier in my basement. But last year was the first summer I did not, and with all that rain, I did not have to run a dehumidifier in my basement because my heat pump water heater was doing the dehumidification as a part of making hot water. So I saved the electricity from the dehumidifier so much as well. And depending on the size of your household and how big of a hot water heater you put in, lifetime savings are in the thousands and quite material. So if your hot water heater is anywhere near ready to go, you want to start thinking about switching it to a heat pump water heater. And the reason you want to think about it is these things require a 220 power line so that they can run that hybrid heating element. So unless you have a electric hot water heater today with a 220 line running to it, you'll have to do a little electric to hook that heat pump water heater up. And, you know, because I was heating with oil, I only had a 120 line going over there. So I'm qualifying for tax credits for that electrical work as well as for that heat pump water heater. And I'm working on with my accountant and getting that this year, you know, in my taxes. There are state incentives and through the Energize CT program for heat pump water heaters. So it's $650 in 2024 off the top of the cost of that water heater. And that the installer takes off directly. All right. Second project, this project came before my water heater. This is my air source heat pump. Who here has an air source heat pump in their home? Okay, some of you do. I got my original air source heat pump probably, I don't know, 12 years ago. It was an older model and I installed it only for air conditioning. And I said that was the best home improvement project I ever did in my house. It was so wonderful at cooling that space, quiet and just, you know, in the background, no more window air conditioners to move in and out every year. And just a great investment. And then one day I realized, wow, this thing actually heats too. I should try that out. And so I started to heat with my heat pump and I realized, oh, this is almost as good as the air conditioning side of it. I should do that. But that older model was not that efficient below freezing temperatures. That was the problem back in the day with heat pumps, was that they really didn't keep up with super cold weather. And, you know, heat pumps work, they're kind of like magic. Like I said at the beginning, air source heat pumps can be up to 300% more efficient than fossil fuels. And the way they work is they don't make heat, they don't combust fuels and waste most of that heat energy up the chimney. They simply move the air from outside the house, they condense it, and they make it warm and they push it into the house. Or in the summer, in reverse, they take the hot, humid air out of the house and they push it out. So they're not really making heat and they're not making cold air, they're just moving the air around. And that's why they're so much more efficient and they're getting more efficient all the time. Okay, so then I said, well, I really want to heat my house with this heat pump. And I want to get rid of my oil boiler for heating my house. And so I decided to replace my older heat pump with a hyperheat system from Mitsubishi. All the manufacturers are now making these super cold weather heat pumps. And this will effectively heat my home down to 10 below, you know, and so there was a really bad cold snap last winter. And it was, I actually turned my boiler on just to make sure my pipes weren't freezing, you know, on the outside of the house. But I was heating this airspace in my house effectively at 10 below. So this is a great thing to do in your home, and we can talk about it in Q&A. And there's significant incentives available depending on the size of the system from the utilities as well, up to $15,000, depending on the scenario. So you're able to really, go out on the Energize CT website, you can see what's available. Your contractor, your advisory service that you might take advantage of will point these things to you. This is a map that just kind of shows the adoption of heat pumps and heat pump water heaters in Connecticut over since 2017. The last year wasn't complete, so the data looks like it's down a little bit. What's interesting is the dark blue bar on the last column. That represents air source heat pumps that are connecting to existing ductwork. So I had a mini split. It's split between the outdoor unit and then the indoor units that blow the air in the space in your house. But if you have existing ductwork and you need to replace the central air system and a furnace, you can get a heat pump with the outdoor unit that simply connects to that ductwork and works through your existing ductwork. And they make mini splits that can be in the ceiling, they can be down on the floor against the wall, they can be under the floor, coming up through the floor, and they can be those bigger units that you saw in my living room that's, kind of the traditional mini split indoor unit. Those things, some people get put off by how they look, but to be honest with you, it kind of disappears into the background once you get used to it, and it's quite comfortable. All right, so this is my house, and I've got 2 solar arrays on there, and my Chevy Volt is parked in front of the garage. And so when I first got my solar, back then, the utilities and the state would only let you purchase exactly the amount of energy that you were using annually. So in net metering, you want to have a system that is going to, meet all of your electric demands at that time based on what your consumption rate was, okay? So I got that system, that first array up on the top of my house, and it offset all my electric costs. And my monthly bill for electricity was $13 a month. There's like a nominal connection fee for having solar, which was great. And in the summer, you make more electricity, and any electricity you don't use goes to the grid, and you get credited for that. They put a special meter on your house. It's a net meter that shows how much is going to the grid, how much you're taking at night or in the winter, and that sort of thing. So in the winter, when your solar panels aren't producing this much energy, you're dipping into the credits you earned in the summer based on how much more efficient your system was in the summer. So in the end, in that old regime, we were netting out at the end of the year between summer credits and winter drawing off of grid resources. Now things have changed, and you can install more solar than you're currently using, and I'll explain that in a minute. But then, I got the Chevy Volt, my first EV in 2017, and I needed to, have more energy to charge that up. And I was suddenly starting to pay electric bills again with that EV, and I didn't want to do that anymore. I got spoiled not having to pay Eversource every time. So I put that array on there, and then lo and behold, away went my electric bill for the EV as well. And it kind of feels good to be driving based on solar power that's coming off my home, that I'm not having to pay a whole lot extra for, under any scenario. The only problem with that thinking of mine was that, my wife said, "Oh, I really like this car," and then eventually we ended up getting a second EV, and again I'm paying Eversource for that power, and now we have 4 EVs. Both my college kids are driving our older EVs, and so I'm really using a lot more power than I used to. I'm trying to get a 3rd set of panels on the back of my house, and that's a long story, but making some progress there. And that's also going to offset my heat pump system, which I installed recently. Now, not everybody, you know, can really navigate putting solar on their house easily. But one of the resources that I used is energysage.com. And Energy Sage, you know, is their reason for existence is to provide, you know, reliable, you know, quotes to people from vetted vendors that can then, you know, you can decide whether or not you wanna get more engaged with them, but there's no obligation. And, you know, Google has got a picture of everybody's roof in America. And they know, they've already calculated how much you're gonna save from solar on every home in America. And so all these contractors have access to that data, and they can quickly give you a rough estimate of, is your house suitable for solar? How much could you save if you installed, you know, a typical system? They'll give you that quote, and then you can talk to them and see if you wanna do something more than that or different. For example, do you wanna put in a backup battery with that solar, which would make a lot of sense? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And like I said, you know, the payback, you know, according to Energy Sage is, in Connecticut, 7.5 to 10 years in Middlesex County. You know, it depends on the roof angle and that sort of thing. Out-of-pocket cost, 11.5 to 15.5. Net savings, 25.5 to 30, almost 34.5. So, you know, it's real money in your pocket, and with electric rates what they are, especially if you're gonna electrify other things, having solar makes a whole lot of sense.
Steve?
Yeah.
It's Steve. 5 kilowatts is relatively small array though.
Yeah, 10 kilowatts, what I put on my main roof, and, you know, the 5 kilowatt, I think even the garage one was like 7 kilowatts or something like that. You know, it's a 30% tax credit regardless of the size of the system. And the paybacks are just that much more over time, you know, depending on the size of the system you choose to install. So the Connecticut Green Bank has smart e-loans, so, you know, the hurdle for most people is the upfront cost. You could lease a system, although that, you know, entangles you with some things where you decide to sell your home, you know, you've got to navigate through that. And if you wanna pay for it up front, you're probably gonna finance that. And so, you know, right now, the rates for the smart e-loans are 5.99 to 7.49. It would be nice to see those rates come back down again. I don't know if that's gonna happen anytime soon, but even with financing at rates like that, you're looking at, you know, reasonable payback periods for solar, and as electric rates go up, your payback period just gets quicker. Now, community solar, and I heard you all talking about that here in your energy meeting. You know, Connecticut has I'd say a variant of a community solar program, but it's not what our neighboring states have. So New York and Massachusetts and Rhode Island all have really interesting and consumer-friendly community solar programs. And basically, you can sign up for community solar as an electric customer. And you can get, you know, a discount off of your electric rate, you know, per month by being signed up with that community solar project somewhere in the state. And so for people who are renters or have condos, or for whatever reason can't put solar on their homes, you know, a community solar would be a great thing to have. Now, you know, Sierra Club is pushing for, you know, a lot of action this session on advancing solar in Connecticut in a significant way. And community solar is a part of that. And there've been hearings in the Energy and Technology Committee the past week, and more coming on some of these renewable energy solutions. But we're going to be advocating for more community solar, better community solar going forward. And that's something that we want to be thinking about as you're talking to your legislators, you know, asking them, you know, to support some of these things as well. You know, solar, Connecticut as a state, we are doing well with rooftop solar, residential rooftop, but we're really significantly behind all of our New England state neighbors aside from New Hampshire. And, you know, like we have half as much total solar installed in Connecticut, you know, compared to Mass and Vermont. Even Rhode Island is ahead of us, Maine. So, you know, we really, and the fact is that, you know, in order for us to, we have a state law that says we need to get to 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040 in Connecticut. And we're not gonna get there unless we really speed up our solar adoption across the state. And so we're advocating for that. We've got some information up here on the table when you're ready to leave. You can take a look at that. We want, hoping that legislators are gonna support that in their bills to do it. You know, there are battery backup for solar now. It makes great sense to consider putting in home battery backup with your solar. Because right now, if you have solar without home battery backup, if the power goes out, your solar power is of no use to you because, you know, they have to, for safety reasons, disconnect from the grid. And you have no way to use that solar power unless you have a battery backup system. Problem is, battery backup systems are really expensive. The prices are coming down, there's competition, and they're gonna get more affordable all the time because they're also on learning curves, but now the state has a program, you know, for backup batteries. They're not gonna run every electric device in your house, but they are, you know, on the left side of this grid, things like refrigerators and internet and, you know, charging devices and fans, televisions, you know, those things will run off of electric battery backup. Things like your clothes dryer and your heat pump and your water heater and your stove are probably drawing too much power. And it would take away from your ability to continue to have lights and things like that while the power is out. So, you know, people tend to want to put in a moderate sized battery for backup. And, you know, like I said, the IRA has 30% tax credit for this, but now there's much more in the way of state incentives through the utilities to put in a backup battery system. So for 2024, there are incentives up to $16,000. There's more equipment available, although Tesla Powerwalls are not yet in there, but they're negotiating with them. And there's more contractors to choose off authorized list to install them. And not to really spend a lot of time on this slide, but the idea here, the reason you get that money is that you make that battery available to the utilities during the summer. So in the months of June, July, and August, they want to be able to draw power from your backup battery between 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. when everybody comes home and turns on their air conditioning. So instead of the utility turning on a natural gas peaker plant that only sits there and goes on when the peak load gets really high, instead they're going to draw from everybody's backup battery and avoid the extremely high cost of turning on that peaker plant. And that's called a virtual power plant by having all these separate batteries out there. And then they flip the switch and they draw that. And if it looks like there's going to be a storm, the potential for a power outage, they don't draw power from your battery because you need it for your own home backup. So it's a win-win for you and your utility to put one of these in if it makes financial sense. And, you know, I'm not going to go through these numbers, but trust me that, you know, it becomes, you need to really think about what that convenience means to you and is it worth it to do that. So, all right. Let's see, home charging for EVs, there's also money out there. Like I said, there's tax credit money from the IRA, but there's also rebates available. So I recently had to put in a new charger. I have 2 chargers in my garage. And I recently had to put one in because my older one had failed. And so I got a $500 rebate to install that charger. And then if I had needed to wire for it, they would have made money available for the wiring as well, $500 more. So if you're gonna get an EV or you have one and you don't yet have a home charger, you wanna take advantage of this solution that's out there. And in addition, by taking that rebate, you agree to be in their managed charging program. And what that means again is that during, the day between 3 and 9 PM, they ask you not to charge your car. You can if you need to, but you wanna, every month, make sure that 90% of your charging happens outside of the 3 to 8 PM period, because, that's when they need the reduced demand. And so if you do that successfully for, a period of time, they give you twice a year, $100 incentive checks. So I got my first $100 incentive check, so I'm like, this is great. If I just behave better and, you know, cooperate in terms of the timing of the charging, I'm getting $200 extra a year to put into my vehicles. So coming close to wrapping up here, so, the IRS has all the details on all the tax credits that are out there. And there's a lot of places you can go, and we have some flyers up here from Sierra Club with some of that information. We have some background information on heat pumps and legislation that's pending, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And so you want to go out to the IRS to look at the, you know, some of the rules on some of the finer points on this, but you know, if you're applying for an energy tax credit, then this is the new form that they have out there for that. And these are the links that I have that I also have printouts on. But what I'll just quickly wrap up with is, you know, this is a generational opportunity. We're all being asked to think about changing how we do business, how we, you know, conduct our own lives in our homes, and how we can do things both from an energy efficiency perspective, but also from a climate change perspective. The legislation that's pending this year, there's a major climate change bill that has elements in it relating to solar, relating to heat pumps, relating to energy efficiency funding for the state. All of these things are vital for the state to move forward and to keep up with what we need to do to meet our climate goals, and to make people aware of and be able to take advantage of all of these great opportunities financially to upgrade our lives and make it better. So I'll stop there and see what questions people have.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Many of these programs are run through Eversource, right? So, like, I took advantage of the rebate on the EV charger and the wiring to support it. But it seems like a lot of these others you can do outside of Eversource. Is that true?
So the IRA ones, yes, you don't need to go through Eversource. The battery backup and the managed charging solution are through the Green Bank and Eversource, and the, you know, any of the energy, you still want to go through Energize CT, which is, you know, a program across both of the state's big utilities, because there's all the state rebates that are available for each of these types of projects through there. I don't think they have anything for solar, but for pretty much everything else they do. So you wanna make sure you're taking advantage of both, because you can combine them. Other questions? Yes. All the way back.
Steve, hi. Yeah, thank you very much. So, given that the IRA was a piece of legislation and we have a presidential election coming up,
Yeah,
how subject to, I'll just say, political whims is the IRA funding?
I mean, you know, that's a great question. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about that. You know, my take would be, number one, you know, strike while the iron's hot, and if you have something really you want to get done, you know, I would never say never, because we've seen, you know, what has happened in the prior administration. But I will tell you that it's going to be popular. People aren't going to want those tax credits taken away. I mean, on a bipartisan basis, you know, solar, you know, and EV tax credits and things like that were continued along in both of the last two administrations. So you know, the odds are that it'll be politically unpalatable to mess with it in its, you know, full form. We'll see, anything's possible. So ideally, you know, you get a project going in the next 2 years and get your tax credits if you can.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Do these only apply to residences or can they apply to farm buildings as well?
You know, there's tax credits for solar, that apply, you know, for, commercial, you know, non-residential scenarios. There's different pots of money under the IRA. I'm not, you know, as versed in all of those, but I know, you know, it depends on, is that a business? If it's a business, then, you know, you need to, take a look at the IRS website and see what credits are available on the business side of it. And a lot of those Energize CT rebates are also available through businesses. There's a separate business section that you can go to.
Another question, if you did some of this work, but didn't go through any of these groups and just finished this, are you still eligible for some of these rebates?
Yeah, so, well, let's say, so describe it more fully.
This mini splits,
So you just did mini splits?
yeah, like 4 of them,
And when did you install them?
last quarter of last year.
Yeah, so last year you would be eligible, okay? So you must have gotten the utility, the Energize CT incentive up front because the installer probably gave you that.
Yeah, that was built in,
That
yeah.
was built in, okay, but what you wanna do is you wanna get that tax, and you wanna,
Yeah.
whoever does your taxes.
Yeah.
You wanna go to them, and you wanna say, okay, look, I put this in, and so that's $3,000, I think, for the air source heat pump, if that's what it was.
Super, okay. And one other question, which is, if I know I can't get solar on my home, because it's just too old, I want to do an array. I have a huge field.
Yeah.
Will the same group be able to help me in terms of putting an array up?
Yeah, so, I mean, I've talked to people who have arrays, and, you know, if you have the space for it and the sun angle and all of that, you know, it's more expensive, I think, to put it up on an array. I don't know how much, I've never talked to somebody about what it costs them to put one in, and they have to run wire, you know,
I have one.
trench a wire, you have one? Yeah, so I mean, yeah, you would qualify for that tax credit,
That's still the same.
and the 30%, you know, includes installation, so it probably includes the structure supporting the array as well.
Thanks.
you think it's bigger than?
I have enough acreage that I want to devote
Yeah,
a portion
keep thinking,
forever to power everything.
export to everybody.
Well, I mean, if you're using it for your business, you know, and your home, I don't know, you know, you'd have to get some good advice from somebody that does this on a regular basis.
But for example, we talked about that community solar, and that was the whole point. One of my fields is right next to a new development that's coming in, and I wanted I wanted the developer to use solar instead of whatever, and they're, you know, not very friendly. But, I'm more than willing to have people sign up for that array once I get it in there.
That will be a fascinating, exploration to find out, you know, what are the rules governing that. I just don't have any knowledge of it. But, you know, I don't think you can set yourself up to, as a community solar provider and, you know, without going through the bidding process and, you know, and being accepted in and providing it to a third party. It doesn't seem like the rules would allow this stuff.
Monopoly.
But that's just the Connecticut law.
Right,
That's Connecticut law.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's along in most states with the monopoly on energy,
Mm.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah, I totally understand. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by the, heat pump water heater,
Yeah,
because I think you're basically using the heat in your basement, right?
yeah,
And so you have a big advantage of an external source. Right?
well, I'm using, so, you know, I have an extra heat pump head in my basement for when my children were younger and they were down there all the time, they would turn on the heat pump and warm up the basement and, you know, be comfortable down there. But most of the time it's never on, and my basement is like 58 degrees or 60 degrees or whatever its, ambient temperature is. And the heat pump water heater is drawing, that fan is drawing the ambient air around in the basement. And it's making the hot water from that. I don't notice it being much colder down there when I go down there to do laundry and stuff like that. So, I think it's, for that type of a space, it's a really good application. And, everybody's got to replace their water heater at some point, so be ready to do a heat pump water heater.
I just make a comment because I'm pretty familiar with those. And, the warmer the basement, in other words, if you had a, for example, a fossil fuel system going next to a water heater, then you'll get the efficiencies that you're looking for, but you're also gonna be burning fossil fuel. The cooler the basement, if you have an electric space down there, for example, where you're not cooling it, not heating it at all, for example, your efficiencies will drop.
Well, actually, I now
If you're
have,
not taking the waste heat.
I now have a heat pump house heater. But I have a fossil fuel water heater still.
Right, that's what I
Right,
got.
yeah, the efficiency is better the other way around, but, in fact, I'm the same thing, and I just looked at one today, actually, over at, in Middletown. But, yeah, the warmer the surrounding air, the more efficient it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, my electric bill, I haven't noticed, when I put that in, I didn't even really notice much of a change, even in the winter, I just didn't notice it, so.
But you do get free cooling, and when my 4 kids were in the house, they used to turn the thing on, just to get the cooling, yeah, and, so,
Yeah,
um,
so anybody here, on the verge of doing a project, that they wanna talk about? Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Okay, maybe I'm conservative, but, I am very leery or concerned about installing panels on a roof. And so I'm thinking of a standalone,
Yeah,
system. Could you see it? We follow the off-grid programs, one is a homestead rescue, et cetera, and they're using,
right,
building panels, off-site, in other words, standalone panels, standalone collectors. So, am I the only one that has this concern about, installing panels on a roof?
I mean, they've installed panels on millions of roofs in the United States, and the industry is dependent on that, and they've been very successful, they've standardized it, they've figured out all the ways to, make sure the roof, is strong enough and doesn't deteriorate because of the panels, or maybe it lasts longer because the panels are protecting them. And so, I think that's just standard fare, but, some people have a concern about the aesthetics and they want to do, something more unobtrusive or in the back of their property somewhere with a independent array. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any where you go to compare solar companies, renting,
Yeah,
buying?
Yeah, so energysage.com is a good
Okay.
place to start.
All right,
If you plug in your address in there and you give them your email, my experience is, and I've used them a couple times. My experience is they're gonna give you 3 quotes right away. They're gonna be able to look right at your house and determine is it a good fit potentially for solar. And then the 3 companies that they're gonna name, have a higher rating than average across, and they're polling people who have used the service, find out how satisfied they are with the work of the contractors that they're recommending. So they're kind of like a place to go for independent, kind of consumer reports type
that's good, thank you.
evaluation. So yeah, I would start there.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I installed solar on my house this past November.
Great.
We went with the lease option.
Yep.
So I think the rate that I'm paying, the company that installed it took advantage of whatever state credits were available, right? But can I apply or submit for a federal tax?
So I don't think so, not if you're leasing, no, because, you didn't pay for it, so they are getting the tax credit.
They're getting state and federal?
They're getting the tax credit, and they're getting the, you know, they're getting the, green bank incentive, or, well, not the utility itself, okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Steve, I just wanna, support you in the three quote option. You should always get three quotes. It's a major layout of cash if you're doing the purchase model.
Yeah,
And, for those people who are thinking about leasing, if you do a quick Google search for solar purchase versus leasing, you can get some, good insights. I always recommend people read lease agreements extremely carefully,
right,
because you really want to be clear when you're entering into that agreement. What's gonna happen, should you sell your house, next person takes over the lease, what happens when the end of the lease, that term is up? You just really want to know these things and
Yeah.
not be surprised by them.
great point, thank you for sharing that. All right, any other questions, anything else I could, yes, sir?
Are there any incentives for DIY projects, or is that all got to be done through a professional contractor?
I think, for the state incentives, you definitely, have to go through contractors to get these things installed. And, the equipment that you're installing, has to meet, the requirements for, Energy Star or efficiency or whatever those things are. Now, more rudimentarily, windows and doors and things like that, I think you can install yourself.
Yeah, but just, there are now, heat pump water heaters that operate off of 110.
Yes, yeah.
So you can plug them in, and if you're handy with, a little bit of plumbing, you can, they're slower to recover.
Yeah.
They take longer, they're not as, as opposed to, two
I
twenty.
read that you can't even buy them in the north.
Yeah, they're not, they're
They
not
have
yet
them.
available.
You did, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are coming, and actually there's, window heat pump units coming, so like a window air conditioner, only it'll heat and cool from the window. And, the thing driving that are, major apartment, complexes in New York City and others where there's no real efficient way to retrofit for a traditional heat pump system. But these are gonna be coming on, they're already coming on the market. And you can plug those in and, heat and cool a small apartment space, from the window essentially. So, these will be additional options where if you have a house with a lot of different rooms that are, not used or occasionally used, or, it doesn't make sense to have a full air source heat pump system heating that space or cooling it, that might become an option down the road as well. Speaking of the 110 volt, water heater. Yes, sir.
I was just gonna share that, we had an air conditioning ducted system in our house, and outside condenser was getting old, needed to be replaced, and we replaced it with a heat pump. So, like you said, we get the heating and the cooling.
Yeah.
I will say though, that it's not as efficient in colder temperatures as the mini splits are. I think that the system like you have tends to operate
Yeah,
very well at low
Designed for it.
temperatures. I don't, mine doesn't. So we still have.
Mine too. Yeah, it only goes down to like 40 or 38.
I have my thermostat set so that when the outside temperature is below 35, my oil furnace
right.
heats the house.
Yeah.
But tell you, winters are getting milder. My heat pump's running a lot more than my oil furnace is.
Yeah,
Is it ductwork you have?
I have
You have a ducted,
ducted down.
you have a ducted system. One thought is that ductwork generally has, you can lose about 20%.
Yeah.
Of the heating or cooling that you would generate, through ductwork.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like I have the same situation as David.
Just to share a couple of thoughts. Because we have been looking at the heat pump conversion. And what we were told was that the air conditioning ducting, which is what the house has, may or may not be adequate for heating a use. In other words, so while it's great, it works for the summer, it might have to be upgraded
Right.
for capacity. And I don't know what you're experiencing in terms of it's not giving you the heating you want in the winter, but I don't know if that's a factor. The other comment I'll make is my son's built a building in town here and installed the I call it high efficiency.
Yeah.
Meaning the heat pumps, they're the mini splits. There's no central. They installed only mini splits for the building, very well insulated, right up to well up to and past standards. And there was not a single day, they have no backup. There's no electric heat backup, there's no furnace backup. It's 100% provided by the mini splits. And there has not been a single day in the 3 years they've owned it that they did not have adequate heat. On the very coldest days, it was chilly. But they could count those on a single hand.
Right.
I would just make that comment.
When it was -10 last winter, you know, it was, you know, at the edge of its ability to keep the house warm, you know, with efficiency. But like I said, there are newer models coming all the time and more of them now have lower operating temperatures than even what I got when I put mine in. So, and there was a big, engineering prize from the federal government, from the Department of Energy for new heat pump, technology, to push the, frontier forward. And so there's better ones coming for sure. And so by the time some of you put them in, none of this will matter. As long as you get good advice, like I said, always go to that advice first, get those free consultants and get some really good guidance in terms of what you need for your house, what will make you comfortable, what you can afford, what rebates and tax credits are available. And, you know, go from there and help you select any contractors. Yes, sir.
Is there such a thing, or is anybody working on a ductless ground source heat pump that you wouldn't need to have going through your ductwork?
I haven't heard of it. You know, everybody I talk to though that has put in a ground source heat pump, you know, really likes it. But they had the ductwork and I thought about it for my house a long time ago and, you know, they said cost of putting in ductwork in your house and retrofitting it wouldn't be worth it at that time. I don't know if they have a newer solution.
I'd like to get rid of my ductwork completely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I hope this was helpful to you. A lot of really good information up here. You know, happy to talk afterwards once we get the lesson. Thank you.